My wife will die tomorrow. It won't be a natural death, nor will it be one she deserves. What will happen is a random act with no significance other than fate's command. We'll be walking together, holding hands, on our way home from work. Her phone will ring as we reach a crosswalk. It's her mother calling to inform us that her cancer has returned. It's not surprising that she'd been in remission for a few years, but her body had been wrecked by the last round of chemo and radiation. The words were heavy on my wife, and I see the tears well up in her eyes. She tries to stay strong in front of me, trying to pretend she can handle the moment she's been trying to prepare. She then begins to approach the crosswalk. What she doesn't realize is that the light has turned red during our little stop. A car hits her as she makes her first step onto the crosswalk, smashing her head to the ground. She dies on impact, and the paramedics are powerless to save her. Everything she ever was will be taken away from me in less than a second, and I will have to watch it happen. I'm so sorry, Stacy. Her death is something I've known since we were children. However, I could not prevent her tragic death, regardless of how hard I want to. She had me promise, swear, never to tell her the unavoidable future truths. Even if I had tried, it wouldn't have mattered. We weren't supposed to know the ending. That's what makes life beautiful, she said. But they're simply words written in a book, a comfortable lie I've forgotten. That's all there is to it. My final living memory of my wife. I'll forget she ever existed after her body is buried and I've moved to another city. All I'll have is a hole in my heart that I won't be able to fill till the day I die. Because it's my curse to remember everything about my own future, but nothing about my own past. To the best of my knowledge, this is how I've always been. From the first steps I took as a toddler through the first words I said. I was given every memory from my whole life, even though I hadn't had the opportunity to experience them. When I feel them, they vanish from my mind. In a strange way, I'm living my life backwards. I am burdened by the knowledge of tomorrow, knowing well that there is nothing I can do to change the passage of time. As a result, at the ripe old age of 35, I have lost every single factual detail about my life. And once these thoughts are written down, they will disappear, washed away by a broken mind. But before we continue with my story, allow me to answer a few questions, such as, how can I write if I never learned? How am I going to walk? How can I possibly build relationships with other people if their details elude me on a daily basis? I'll respond to the first two. Do you remember your first steps? Is learning to stand on 2 feet an act, or is it simply something you know how to do, a skill ingrained in your very being? Is it necessary to consider before speaking, or do words just flow out with just their context processed? Love, on the other hand, is a feeling that exists outside of memory. It is so buried deep in our hearts that there have been cases of complete amnesia, ridding the person of everything save the love they hold within. Memory and skills do not always go hand in hand. Some skills are built into our muscles and subconscious minds. That's why, even though I remember nothing about my mother, I still miss her, and why, on her last night of life, I love my wife. My curse is more similar to reverse amnesia, and my stories are only words read from a notebook. Every day, I wake up to read about events from a time I can't remember. The handwriting doesn't even belong to me, it belongs to 2 other persons. My mother wrote the first set of stories, which spanned my youth until my mid-20s. She was a clever person who was quick to act and as smart as heck. She noticed something odd in me at a young age, when I started predicting things that hadn't yet happened. I was 5 years old when the first event occurred. It was such a little, insignificant complaint. Because of the storm, I didn't want to go outside. I was afraid that lightning would strike us during our picnic. My mother was naturally confused because the trip was scheduled for the next day. And the weather forecast had definitely predicted that the day will be full of sunlight. The next morning, my mother was surprised to discover that my predictions had come true. She wrote it down in her diary as an unusual, confused but still suspicious. My mother found me crying in my room a year later. I was heartbroken because our cat had died. She sat down and began to comfort me. Even though our cat was getting older, he remained healthy and as curious as ever. In the middle of my frantic cries, the cat just walked in, checking what the commotion was about. He died quietly in his sleep a month later. A good, old cat who had a wonderful life. As I grew older, I immediately learned to separate between the past and the future. My mother had already put two and two together, and she knew my life would be a complicated one full of challenges. As a result, I had difficulties making friends. My wife, Stacy, lived next door at the time, and she also saw something strange about me. It felt more like a superpower than a curse to her young mind, and she quickly agreed to help keep my secret. My mother never loved me any less because of my ability, whether it was a gift or a curse. Instead, she took it upon herself to write down whatever moments we shared. That way, even if my life was not remembered, it would never be forgotten. She did everything she could to make my life easier. Despite her best efforts, the journey was difficult not just for me, but also for those who loved me. Of course, Mom never blamed me. It wasn't my fault, after all. But, like all people do, my mom passed away. I can't remember exactly what happened, but the feeling associated with it is still fresh in my heart. It was my 22nd birthday, and we'd booked a table at a decently fancy restaurant. I can't really remember if the dinner was nice or not. All I know is that it rained on that specific day. My mom was supposed to drive on the slippery roads. She was hit by a drunk driver who didn't react in time to stop as she turned a foggy curve. I couldn't accept her death on my birthday at the time. So I did the impossible and changed it. That's when I found the real curse of my condition. I tried everything to convince my mom not to go. I begged her to stay at home, saying that if she even went outside, I wouldn't show up for my own birthday. My mother agreed to stay at home as a result of my anger. She was wise enough to recognize that something horrible was about to happen, and did not investigate the situation further. We spent the evening watching a movie, which was simple entertainment for someone who couldn't remember the story, but I was happy anyway. I believed I had changed the direction of history. Because my mother never left the house, she was never hit by the drunk driver. But the odd thing about fate is that nothing can stop it. My efforts were completely useless, because she was supposed to die. Her soul, spirit, essence, or whatever you want to call it, disappeared that night. Her time had come, and even though I had delayed her physical death, she was stolen from me. I didn't realize anything was wrong until the next morning. I discovered her at the side of her bed, lifeless and catatonic. None of the doctors could explain it because all of her vitals were normal. Despite her physical health, she was simply gone. That day, I realized that I couldn't help anyone who fall victim to fate's harsh judgment. In the end, every attempt I made simply made things worse. Sadly, because I never truly witnessed her death as it was meant to happen, it is the only memory of my past that I have. However, it does not match reality. In my imagination, she was hit by a drunk driver. However, according to every known source, she spent her final years in a coma, dying only when her body gave out. My girlfriend had known about my curse for years by the time my mother died, and she took on the responsibility of recording my life. Each event, important or minor, was jotted down into the same notebook that my mother had carried around for so many years. I still don't know what I did to earn such a wonderful woman. She still loved me despite my complicated life. It was strange, though, because we had known each other since we were kids, and as she came to know me, I started to forget her. I think it helped to have grown up alongside my secret. That's the only way she'll be able to see beyond it, to who I really am. Even when we first met, I knew we'd be married someday. Of course I did. I kept every single memory in my head. I'm not sure if that helped me to look more confident than I felt, or if fate had a role in our matching. However, by the time we reached the age where crushes were considered normal, we had started dating. We shared all of our firsts as a group. Even though I don't remember any of them, I can remember the emotions connected with each one. I love her with all of my heart, despite the fact that I'm losing some of my memories of her with each passing day. This brings us to the present. We won't be able to sleep tonight. She won't understand why, but something will irritate her mind. Instead, we'll stay up late talking and reminiscing about older times. I'm not going to cry or crack, and I'm not going to tell her what's about to happen. She'll just finish her final entry in my book before falling asleep in each other's arms. I can't stop her death because I don't want her to face the same fate as my mother, and after she's gone, there will be no one to carry on my story. Each day will pass as it always has, and I'll forget it. I'm doomed to walk this world alone, and all I can do is wait for my death. That's why I'm writing this now, as my wife sleeps next to me. I need the rest of the world to know what I can't. Someone needs to remember my story, to remember that I already walked this path. I don't have any regrets about my life because, despite all odds, it was a happy one. It has been filled with love, and despite the fact that my memory is lost, I believe there will be a trace of my presence, vibrating through time itself. Life is not a certainty. Don't treat it like tomorrow is a given. It might never come. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please give it a like and share it with your friends. We would love to know your view about the story in the comments. Follow us in our social media accounts, links in the description. Contact us if you have stories you want to share and if you have any suggestions. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any future video. Thank you for your support.